The first person to ever get a degree in the United States was this guy called Benjamin in 1636. 1636. 200 years later, the first woman received her first degree in the United States of America, and this was in 1840. And then the first black man in the United States to receive a degree in psychology was in 1921, and he is better known as the father of black psychology. Now, the first person to get their degree in 1636, which is quite literally 400 years ago, I can't really grasp that time. Like, that time frame is just so far. I don't even know what 400 years ago means. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wonder how different it was 400 years ago to go to university. By the way, mind you, he graduated from the University of Harvard, which is the oldest university in the United States of America, and it is now a, what do they call it? Ivy League school in the United States. But why I wanted to do some research on black psychologists is because as a person of color and an armchair psychologist, when I learned and studied psychology, I had never actually came across a black psychologist, and it's not really something I noticed until I thought about it. But when I thought about it, I said, okay, bet, let me do some research. And that brings me to Mr. Francis Cecil Sumner. And I just mean, first of all, what a name. I feel like that name just sounds like you were meant to do something in life, okay? So he was born in 1895. Now, this is a little bit more relatable time-wise. This is basically just over 100 years ago, which you can think about the things that happened in the last 100 years, right? Like, we've had war, we've had civil rights movements, we've had a lot going on. So at this specific time in 1895, the early 1900s, the civil rights movements, we don't even know about it. We are only a couple generations outside of slavery, okay? So times were rough. And Mr. Sumner was from the South, so things were even worse down there, okay? And especially when it came to black people getting education, it was really difficult in the United States at this time. At age 20, he graduates from Lincoln University in the United States with a degree in philosophy and got valedictorian of his class. And then he went on to get a bachelor's in English from Clark University. And at this time, mind you, Mr. Sumner was fluent in English, German, and French. English, German, and French, which, like I said, at the time, we are only a couple generations outside of slavery in white America. Black people don't have access to education, and he knew 3 languages, like, slay. He is impressive, okay? So he is clearly a nerd. He's got it going on. And now he's on his way to collect his 3rd degree, okay? Or this is like, I guess, his actual real degree. So he got an honors first and then a bachelor's, but this is the equivalent to a PhD, I want to say. So he applies for his PhD, he gets it, but then, he gets accepted into university, but then he gets drafted for World War I. And respectfully, how crazy is it to go and fight in a war? And by the way, I said World War I, okay? I feel like for me, somebody that was born in the 90s, I just think about World War II. Like, what even happened in World War I? How did, like, so long ago. World War I he got drafted into, okay? But how crazy is it to go and fight for a country that literally hates you? Anyway, moving on. So he went to Germany for 4 years, did his thing, came back, went back to university again, applied for his PhD at Clark University, and in 1920, his dissertation titled Psychoanalysis of Freud and Adler. Now, have you guys heard of Freud? I feel like most people have heard of Freud. He's had very unique views on certain things, but you know, he was not far from him. I believe the principal at his university mentored Freud, so like they are not far. They're kind of like age mates. Now, thank God this same principal actually appreciated a smart, intelligent black man, because whilst all the other universities were like, you are not coming to study here, he accepted him. And thanks to his involvement, Sumner's education was honestly possible in the first place. So Hall granted him with paid fellowship at the university, after every school denied him, like I said, literally just because of his race. Like, he would not get accepted, he would not get any funding just because he was black, even though he was very educated. But of course, things wasn't easy just because he had one person on his side. He still faced loads of pushback when it came to getting financial funding for his studies and just general racial hostility. But again, despite that, in 1920, Francis Cecil Sumner becomes the first black man in the United States of America to receive a degree in psychology. And if you think the story stops there, it does not. This is where things get started. From here, he was literally unstoppable. So let's think about the time here, okay? The 1920s. This is 50 years before the civil rights movements that happened in the 60s and 70s. At the time, the US widely used the IQ test to determine if somebody was intelligent or not. And if you didn't know, obviously these IQ tests were created by white psychologists. And that's why you go to that school over there, because you can't study with us because you simply just cannot keep up. Like, your brains will like explode. But obviously, this wasn't right, and Francis Sumner wanted to do something about it. Again, for perspective, imagine no one in your country caring about you, basically. Like, no one was doing studies on Black people for Black mental health, Black well-being. Like, what? No one. So he was literally paving the way, the first guy on the front line going against these, honestly, I mean, just going against the outright racism that Black people were less inferior, less intelligent, and yeah, that's why you guys had to be slaves. So he argued an early environmentalist approach before it even became mainstream. So he argued that behavior in intelligence is largely influenced by things like access to education, economic conditions, community support, cultural expectations, which seems obvious somewhat now, but this was not. This was like, whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean if we give someone a good education, they may be educated? No way! At the time, it was very much intelligence is fixed. You are either born with intelligence or you are not. So you can imagine the backlash that he was getting when he was coming out with these opposing views. His white counterparts had been so proud of their IQ test, been so proud of categorizing people on an intelligence scale that completely makes no sense, really. But it did not stop him. Sumner was actually one of the founding fathers of the first psychology department in a HBCU university, And for my UK babes, HBCU, if you don't know, are psychologies basically for Black students, which when I first found out what HBCU is, I was like, wow, like, so extreme. You need Black psychologies, but you need Black universities, but yeah, literally they did, because they wasn't allowed to study. So he was like I said, one of the founding fathers of the first psychology departments in a HBCU university. So he said, you guys don't want to study Black people over there? Cool. I'm just going to set up my own curriculum right over here. Which, honestly, very smart tactical movement on his part. Instead of going head to head with them, he just said, bet, you guys stay with your IQ test over here, and I am going to educate the future Black psychologists that are going to help reshape this country. And please remember the time here. He was arguing this 50 years before the civil rights movement in America actually took place. Like, we were just getting into integration. We were just getting into mixing the Blacks and the whites together. Okay, and this is within the past 100 years. Sumner, he was that guy. He was a mentor. He wanted to put on the future generations of Black psychologists. He created a whole new ecosystem for Black psychology and genuinely really changed the path of how psychology was studied, accessed for African Americans. Now, after his PhD, his studies spanned loads of topics, okay? We're talking about the differences between mental health between whites and Blacks, something no one was talking about before. The perception of Black individuals in the justice system, which today is still a problem, especially in America. When he entered psychology, journals were literally publishing, mainstream journals were publishing, proving that Black people were intellectually inferior. White psychologists like Lewis Turnham, so he was actually the developer of the IQ test, right? So he wrote that Black people were at the bottom of the intelligence scale. Sumner was writing, teaching, creating a space that went directly against that backdrop, which is why his achievements were just so revolutionary, because like I said, nobody was doing this before him. He wasn't just the first Black psychologist, he was that guy. He said, I'm literally going to kill you with intelligence to where you have nothing to say because now you don't look intelligent. But honestly, what I find crazy is the fact that he did so much for Black psychology, for the future of education in America, and I never came across him, ever. I've never heard of him until I went and done my research and went and took a little deep dive. And I wonder, is psychology more balanced now? Right? And of course, I had to do some research. Is the field less racist? Is it less biased? And as of 2023, there is still about 84% of psychologists in the US that are white. So only 26% are Black or people of color or an ethnic minority. And I would argue we're still facing the same or similar challenges, maybe not on the same scale, but similar challenges that was going on literally 100 years ago. So I don't know what that tells you, but what I'm going to tell you is next. So obviously we've spoken about the father of psychology, but I'm a girl, I'm for the girls. So now I've got to speak about the godmother of psychology, who actually was rolling around the same times of Frances Sumner. I wonder if they knew each other. I wish I could find that out. So let me tell you about my girl. She was actually born the same year of Frances Sumner. I'm gonna have to put sunglasses on at this point, okay? And like I said, she is referred to as the godmother of Black psychology. And she was also born down south in Texas. And she was one of 11, okay? 11. She had 10 siblings and she was the oldest girl, second oldest overall. Now, her parents were farmers. They were not well off, okay, as most Black Americans at this time, but they wanted to save up enough just to at least send one of their children to college, okay? That was their dream. And it was going to be, of course, the oldest son, right? Because he's the son and he's the oldest. And now, we mentioned earlier how difficult it was for Black people to access education, but really, it was difficult for Black men to access education, and it was 5 times harder for Black women to access education. So Ines actually wasn't able to get any sort of education until 1907, okay? She was born in 1895. And then the family moved to another town in Texas, but they only ended up staying 1 year because there was literally no school for their kids to go to. Like, first of all, imagine not being able to Google if there's a school near where you're about to live, okay? Fuming. And then imagine actually moving somewhere and there's no school. Well, there is a school, but there's just no school for your kind, okay? The colours. There's no coloured school around here. So they only ended up staying there a year, but the rest of the family ended up staying in this town, and Ines and her older brother moved back to where they was before. And this is so they could continue their education. Now, Ines, she was that girl, okay? She was an educated queen. So although the college fund was for her older brother, because again, he was the oldest, he's the guy, the brother saw how locked in Ines was and was like, you know what, girl? You go get your degree. You get it. You deserve it. You are that girl. Me, I don't want that stress. I'm not going to do that. I'm not that locked in, okay? I'm going to do something else. So Ines gets a lucky ticket and gets to go to college. This queen even paid for 6 of her siblings to also go to college, okay? Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 of her siblings got to go to college because she was that girl, okay? So she also graduated valedictorian whilst earning her teaching certificate in 1910. Now, just focus on the words here, teaching certificate, okay? So it's not a full degree. So again, even though she's getting an education, she's not getting the same level as education that men would. And I also want to highlight the difference in timing, okay? So they was born the same year. Sumner had his PhD in 1920. He was 25 years old, okay? Even with being drafted in World War I for 4 years. My good sis Ines did not get her degree until 1933. 13 years after Mr. Frances Sumner, because of how difficult it was for Black women to get education, especially down south, okay? This is the Jim Crow era. Now, again, as a British babe, I had to do my research a little bit because I've heard about the Jim Crow era, but I wasn't really sure what it was. And the Jim Crow Act quite literally is the laws for segregation. And it didn't officially end until 1964, 1965, when we actually had the civil rights movements, which now time gets even more relative because 1965, like my dad was born in 1966. And that's only when the segregation laws officially ended in some parts of the South. Crazy, okay, crazy. So because her education wasn't as direct and smooth, it's quite complicated, her journey. So a bunch of things happened between 1921 and 1932 when she finally gets her degree. So I'm going to try to keep it simple because, like I said, it's a little bit complicated. So 1921. This is when she began to work towards her PhD. She enrolled at Samuel Houston College, okay? 5 years later, she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts with a minor in English and psychology. She also got a distinction, which apparently means a GPA of 3.75 plus, which honestly, I don't really know what that means, but apparently it's very impressive, very smart. So in 1926, she graduated with that bachelor's. From then to 1930, she taught in schools for Black students in Texas. So she worked as a teacher training supervisor. And this is kind of building up her credits, if you like, like, so she can start to do something real, you know, get a real degree. So in 1930, she was invited to join the faculty at Samuel Houston College, which basically means she started teaching education and psychology and started to be a professor almost of some sorts. And then 1932, whilst working at Samuel Houston College, they gave her fellowship to pursue her PhD. Now, I was not familiar what a fellowship was. I was very confused. And the PhD was going to be at the University of Cincinnati. Okay, she's moving out of the area, okay? Now, a fellowship is different to a scholarship, and I had to do my research again. So a college giving you a fellowship means you've been awarded a prestigious position of a form of financial support, okay? So typically to advance your education or study or independent research. So it's basically like when you're really smart, we're going to give you some money to continue being smart, okay? Because you're that girl. But it doesn't have to be here. It can be anywhere. She also won $1,000 aid from the John D. Rockefeller, which is just crazy. And $1,000, I should have probably done the comparison of what that would be now. John D. Rockefeller, from one of the wealthiest families in the United States, mysterious, all that kind of drama. Not going to say no more. I don't want to get sued, but you know what I mean. If you know, you know. But anyway, she wins this aid and off she goes to University of Cincinnati, which is in Colorado. I think, do you know what? I don't know. I don't know the map of the United States like that. So I'm just going to shut up and keep going. So 1933, she finally earns her PhD in educational psychology, becoming the first Black woman, clack it, in the United States to receive a degree in psychology, PhD in psychology. But listen, it was not easy for my good sis, okay? Although she had this fellowship to go to Cincinnati, she had to take 4 undergrad courses to basically make up for her time at Samuel Houston College. They was like, okay, you've gone to this college, but it's not really to our caliber. How I would say is think about when you're in school and you did GCSE, but someone did BTEC. It's like, you know, it's just that extra level of prestige, and it's like you didn't have that here. So she undertook 4 undergrad courses to make up for that. So she does 2 English courses, abnormal psychology and physical education. And she wasn't done there. Like literally she was just she was a woman of education. She undertook extra classes that were specific for her thesis for her master's. Like she was locked in. And her dissertation, which I'm going to repeat word for word verbatim because I feel like we shouldn't try to dim down what was really the reality that was going on at this time. So I'm not going to soften the title, but the title of her thesis for her PhD was The Non-Academic Development of Negro Children in Mixed and Segregated Schools. So now at the time in America, integration is starting to become a thing, okay? So they're finally like, okay, fine, we can put you guys in the same school. Francis Sumner had proved that, okay, you guys are not inherently less intelligent. We're going to start mixing you in schools. So everybody, of course, thought this was a good thing, right? Like we're finally getting access to equal education, progressing, we're getting further. But my good sister Ines was arguing, okay, just because you put kids in the same school, when it comes to their education, it may be a better environment, better access to education, but what about everything else? What about their mental health? Okay, so what she was saying was almost taboo at the time because she was kind of going against integration. She said, what if integrated schools help academically but hurt emotionally? And you know, I felt that because, yeah, nobody's thinking about the baby girls and the baby boys. She wasn't against the equality of education, but she just wanted to investigate how different environments shaped Black children's confidence, self-concept, and social adjustment. And just like Sumner, she found that experiences were determined by factors like poverty, limited resources, and racial discrimination. So the study that she did went like this. She had 64 Black students across segregated and integrated schools. And this is in the South and Midwest, so the same kind of area that she lived and grew up in, right? So she used teacher reports, interviews, observations, and she measured self-esteem, personality adjustment, social comfort, the sense of belonging. And what she found, not surprisingly really when you think about it, but Black children in segregated schools, so taught by Black teachers who actually cared about them, affirmed them, showed them love, didn't think that they were innately stupid, they showed stronger identity and confidence, better classroom participation, and fewer feelings of inferiority. Black children in integrated school often felt lonelier, more anxious or withdrawn, pressured to prove themselves, something that's still happening now, and more likely to internalize racism, microaggressions. Now, microaggressions wasn't even a word, it wasn't even a term then, it was just the norm, okay? So like I said, just because you put black children in the same classroom doesn't mean their teachers like them, doesn't mean their teachers' ideas of their intelligence has changed necessarily, right? So she concluded that the quality of environment and affirmation mattered more than simply just putting them together, okay? We need to change it from the inside. And a child cannot learn in an environment where they feel unwanted. And I feel that is just so true and deep and relevant even to this day. What are your thoughts on this? I'd love to know. But she found that racial injustice. I don't know why I keep getting so tongue-tied on justice. But racial guys, please. She found that racial injustice, please, thank you, and feelings of isolation have damaging effect on the psyche and are detrimental when it comes to a child's development, like, duh, okay? And then combined with poor living conditions, you're literally living in a country that hates you. Double homicide. And can you imagine the first day of integration? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall. I would definitely not have loved to have been there, but I just can't even imagine the first day. Like the first day. Because I would imagine that they just moved the blacks into the white schools, right? Or did they build new schools that were mixed? I feel like the blacks went over there. I could just can you just imagine? Drama. But now, unfortunately, our good sis Ines, all the fantastic stuff that she did, the length of time it took her to finally get her degree and do such a groundbreaking study in black psychology, she was involved in a tragic car accident the year after getting her degree whilst visiting her family in Texas. So just literally 1 year after doing her degree at 33 years old, she passed away. And I think it's so, again, just the time of this, everything is so ironic how it took her 13 years longer to get her degree and the year after she passed away. You know, like maybe you're an Ines, maybe you have some life-changing, groundbreaking things to do. So get to it. So she will always be remembered, like I said, to be the godmother of black psychology. And I think she is just an iconic queen. I love her. And honestly, she really left a long-lasting legacy that still impacts the educational system today. And a lot of studies have been built upon her original study as well in more recent years when it comes to education and black students, mental health, how racial trauma, discrimination affects somebody's ability, honestly, to be the best person they can when they go to school, right? School is somewhere you're meant to feel safe, but if you've got all of these things bringing you down, environment is stronger than will sometimes. So our good sis Ines, RIP, like I said, she'll be remembered as the godmother of black psychology, an educator and an advocate for the education and well-being of honestly all children, okay? So after hearing both stories, do you really think that we have moved forward from the biases that they were fighting over literally 100 years ago, okay? It's 2026 right now. Francis Sumner got his degree in 1921. My good sis Ines didn't get her till 1933. Have things stayed the same? Have they evolved to different ways now with social media and phones? Is it different? I feel like since I've been doing this psychology research, a lot of the things that I look back on, it's like we're still, maybe it's not the same, but we just still have the same issues, you know? Have we really grown? Have we really changed? Or do we just have better technology? Really is the question. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I hope you enjoyed today's Psych Cat. Please subscribe, like, share, do all that. Thank you very much. And I'll see you for the next one.